Salve, Justin.
So, we're with Mike again to provide a commentarius, so to speak, of the Iran war. Caesar sent dispatches back to Rome while the war was going on. We don't like Caesar now, or at least I don't. I think Mike's still a Romanophile.
Hail Caesar.
Yeah. So I guess we don't have a real structure here. We will have next time. I think I want to probably review the Limigantes because I think that's relevant. There's a lot of relevant Persian history here that can inform, maybe understand the present. Modern Iran is not ancient Iran, but there's a lot of continuity with the geography, the culture to some degree. And one of the best passages in Ammianus Roman history was when we learned about the Limigantes. They seemed to have avoided a genocide. It sounded like there was something very brutal that the Romans had in mind, but it seemed like they avoided one as soon as Iran, started to attacking the frontier, and suddenly Ammianus just wanted to not talk about the Limigantes. And I think our conclusion is that they disappear from history because they won. They got their freedom, which is never what an empire wants. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing that I find interesting comparing, ancient Rome Limigantes to our modern war in Iran is that Limigantes were besieged, they were attacked, Rome attempted to subjugate them and take their lands away, but they resisted. They fought back,
Hmm.
and so they were under siege. They were attacked, but yet they fought back at the same time.
Yeah, and
They used offense in addition to, I guess, defense, and I think we're seeing the same thing with the war in Iran now. We
yeah,
see a country under siege, but we also see Iran aggressively fighting back.
yes.
As with the missiles and drones.
Yeah, I would say to the reader or the listener that yeah, the Limigantes were on the Danube, but it still reminds me of Gaza. So Gaza, as we know, is still there's still a siege there, but
Exactly.
right now, right now, the relief army is the Iranian armed forces, and it's like any siege in history. Um, if the besieged isn't strong enough to repel the attacker, then they need a relief army. And for people like me and the Palestinian cause, we were like, well, what's going to happen now? I mean, we know, Hamas wasn't disarmed. And as we know from studying Roman history, never give up your weapons to an empire. You cannot trust the Romans. Yeah, the Lusitanians, they disarmed and were immediately massacred. That's way over in Iberia. And so you don't want to disarm. And when Mike was talking about the Limigantes, yeah, studying Israeli media, you see how empires talk the same way. They can't admit defeat. They're narcissists. They really hate to lose because they have to keep this myth going of supremacy. I mean, once the myth is gone that 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 imperial armies are actually not invincible, then you embolden the rebels. And we were looking at the Limigantes, and it was just we'll go into greater detail next time, but it's just like something happened. The emperor was embarrassed, right? Like he had to flee, and it sounded like okay, so the Romans were defeated, and he's trying to cover it up. Then there was a battle, and then the narrative just ends abruptly. The Persia has attacked the frontier. Ammianus takes immediately east, and we're like, well, what happened to the Limigantes on the Danube? Nothing. We never know, and I just assumed, well, I that's good actually. They won their freedom, because of mighty Persia. That's the Romans just had to stop whatever they were doing on the Danube and deal with Iran. This is not a small tribe here, Persia, and it's the same thing today. This is This is not Hamas here. This is not a ragtag, you know, group of guerrillas fighting on for dear life. This is a great country, Iran.
A huge country
Yep.
geographically, and what, some 92 million residents. Yeah,
Yeah.
this, I mean, they're perhaps the largest country in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Uh, Certainly geographically they are. But my observation about the Rome and the Limigantes is that the Limigantes more or less resisted, outlasted Rome, and
True.
they were not ultimately subjugated. They were not defeated, and Rome just cut bait. They left,
Yeah.
and because they had a bigger battle to fight elsewhere. And so the Limigantes survived and perhaps even thrived after Rome left. A modern
What?
example of the
Yeah.
same thing would be the long war in Afghanistan. 17 years America was in Afghanistan. The Afghanis were not defeated ultimately. They survived, and America left. They they just pulled up stakes and
Yeah.
left.
Yeah. You just have to hold on. And
Hmm?
by avoiding defeat, you win. And
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the objective of Iran in this new conflict is not to be defeated, to hang on, and to hang on not just with defense but with offense, disrupting the commerce in the region, disrupting the region in general. Qatar's airspace is closed. Great disruption. The
Yes.
Strait of Hormuz closed. I mean, this is huge. And so this policy of disruption is the best offense for Iran in this conflict, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. It's the imperial war machine. I think in all historical periods is requires a vast logistical network, and by closing it down, you defeat the empire militarily. You don't have to kill all their soldiers, just remove its ability to move. That's it.
And
Just
supply itself.
cut its attack its very long and vulnerable lines of supply, which is what the Iranians are doing by attacking the air bases. And then not only that, but it seems like there's no way to prevent yourself from getting hit by missiles. I've noticed. So with the Jewish colony, it has the best defenses in world history. They have the Iron Dome, they have the David Sling, they have Arrow 1, 2, and 3, and they're still getting hit. And so I think what Iran knew also, they would also get hit, but they have their air defenses, they have their electronic warfare, they have their assistance from Russia and China, but they knew they would have to take out the American and Israeli air bases, radars, and airfields and stuff in order to win. They had to go on the offense and knock out their ability to hit Iran because, as you know, right now Iran is being hit, and the only way to stop being hit is to attack the empire's ability to hit you, and that's what I see happening.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation because the more Iran disrupts um, commerce and air travel and so forth, the more they're inviting these hits. In fact, that's been part of the American policy, Israeli policy, is to take out the drones, the missiles, the launchers, their stockpiles, and so it's massive bombardment of Iran to do that. But Iran, of course, is continuing to send drones and missiles and disrupting the situation there, which you know it shows that they're still fighting, that they're not going to be subjugated. But the other point I wanted to make is that also creates a problem with what's the word, public relations back home.
Oh, let me we'll go ahead. Yeah, finish your thought.
And so the point there is that, if the price of gas goes up by 20, 30, 40, 50%, people at home are not going to like this war.
Yeah.
If American boys, men and women are dying in combat, we're not going to like it at home.
Mhm.
If we can't fly to Japan because our flight goes through Doha, we're not going to like that at home. And
Mhm.
this is going to create pressure on the American war machine and perhaps
Mhm.
this degree Israel to stop the war and to negotiate some sort of peace and end the disruption.
Okay, yeah. No doubt the disruption will happen, but um, I don't think there's anything we can do to stop it. I think that's kind of what we in the Palestinian cause have been complaining about for a long time is the myth of democracy. It's dead. It's been killed. Even the facade of it is no longer here. I've never before ever wanted to talk to a Missouri senator, and I reluctantly did so because it's necessary. I've got to complain. I've got to lodge my complaints here, and I did so early. I sent an email to Senator Eric Schmidt about humanitarian aid. The International Rescue Committee wrote it for me, and they did that for anybody who donated. They had this email that they wanted you to send um, to your senator.
Copy and
Eh,
paste.
yeah, and well, they actually did it for me, and it's like the reply was one of the stupidest, most ignorant emails that I've ever heard. It's like, I'm proud to support Israel against the terrorist state of Iran. It's like, oh, fuck you, man. You don't know anything. And later, a year later, I sent him an email that just corrected every single thing that he said. I just said, you are an idiot, man. You don't know anything. I mean, I know politicians in America are not professionals at anything except being a politician, but you are one of the most ignorant people I've ever written an email to in my life. And now you're not ignorant anymore. I'm educating you on Hamas, the freedom fighters. This email got no response at all. So,
Right.
so there's the Republic for you. This is the no, I think it was a beautiful moment because it's like the truth is out. The Republic is nothing. It's like a joke. We're always like in school taught, like, look at the Constitution and the Republic, and I'm looking at it like it's just an oligarchy. Like, what do you want me to say? I'm not an oligarch. So why should I praise this Constitution? I want a democracy. I don't want this because this is really terrible. I mean, I send an email, I get a dumb response. I send another one, then I get no response. So what you were saying about the disruption, we're going to feel some pain, and that's earned. I bring it on. I want it. I'll walk to work if I have to. I want the genocide to be over with. But the problem is that I don't think we can stop the war. I think Iran's going to have to beat the empire, and we're going to have to cheer them on. That this will make some Americans uncomfortable, but you're going to have to understand, all of you, we're not in the oligarchy. We're not benefiting from the empire. Let's see it beaten. And I think Britain has already gone through with this. When they were withdrawing from the colonies, a lot of English people didn't care. It's like, I'm just an ordinary English person. What am I gaining from a base in, Malay, Kenya or something? Well, they're still there in Kenya. Yeah, the British never left Kenya. I'm trying to think of, well, Yemen, that's an example. Yemen. I think your average Englishman just thought to himself, what am I gaining from Yemen? Let's leave. What do you think about how this is going to turn out here? If Iran has to win, how do you think this is going to go over here?
Well, I disagree that we have no power politically in the war. I think it's diminished. I don't think it's great, but we do have power, and that we still elect representatives in Congress. So if we can put representatives in Congress that want to end this war, the war will end. We just have to stack Congress with Democrats that want to end the war.
Right.
And how does that happen? Well, when the public gets unhappy with the disruption,
Mhm.
with the fact that they're paying too much for gas or they can't fly to Japan, then they start to get restless and they start to put pressure on their representatives. And ultimately, they vote against the people that want to continue the war, right? And so I think that's the democratic process, as you know, it's not strong, as you point out,
Yeah.
but it still is a tool that we must use to end this war?
Um, I think Iran's got to win it because Joe Biden was responsible for the genocide before Trump was responsible for the genocide, and then he was voted in. We did what you said, Mike. We said we voted for this guy because, well, I didn't vote for him. I voted Green, but I know that I couldn't vote for Trump because he murdered Qasem Soleimani. He's a general. I respect him, but I told my mom, "Why don't you vote for Trump?" And what did he do? He continued the war.
Mhm.
And a republic is not a democracy. A republic, you elect a representative, and then the representative does what the oligarchy does, what the oligarchy wants. Now it's even worse, I think, than when the Constitution was first written. I mean, I don't really, the monarchy in England is still here, and the oligarchs in England and Europe and America are one class now. It's one empire, and they have never been overthrown. It's unfortunate to see some of the France had a revolution, that's a real one. That's what one looks like, but we've never had one. So I don't really think that unless we have a revolution, we ourselves can't directly end a genocide. Like people had, like 80%, what I'm saying is 80% already knew that this war was not a good one and wanted to end it. Um, you're saying let's vote then in these midterms. And I think the Republicans are going to lose some seats, but I think the war's well, we'll see. That could, yeah. I think as far as the empire goes, I think you'll agree with this one. I think the Democrats are smarter imperialists, but they're murderers too, man. I mean, they're genocidal people too. Biden, Obama, Clinton, they committed war crimes, but not it. Biden is the worst one. But if you look at Obama, he was a war criminal, but he wasn't a genocidal war criminal. Like this has been a disaster for the American empire. I mean, America is hated like never before. So what do you? I'll let you.
It has been a disaster, and let me draw a comparison, and that is Vietnam. Uh, both Republicans and Democrats supported the war in Vietnam. Johnson was a huge proponent of the war there. But eventually, the American public became so unhappy with it, with protests and demonstrations. Ultimately, the oligarchs, the government, their hand was forced, and we left Vietnam. The same thing happened more or less in Afghanistan. It was an unpopular war. And yeah, the military industrial complex had a vested interest in waging the war, just like this one. But eventually, public sentiment did play a big role in us leaving Vietnam and leaving Afghanistan. And the same thing, in my opinion, has to happen with this conflict. We have to resist, we have to protest, and eventually we will leave.
Yeah, and I think with Vietnam, we have to give credit to the Vietnamese for liquidating invaders. It's like, the draft was a part of that. Americans resisted because they didn't want to be drafted. Why? Because the Vietnamese were pretty good. They were tough. They were inflicting casualties. And so that's, I want to give credit to the Vietnamese first for defending their country and then give credit, I guess, to Americans for exercising some common sense. Like, why do I want to, why do I want to fight a Vietnamese person? But it took a while though to get that going. Uh, Finally, it got going, and then did the war end? No, Nixon committed a huge war crimes in North Vietnam, carpet bombing. Who knows how many people he killed? And then finally, it just became. I'm not a Vietnam horse historian, but finally, uh, consensus was to leave. But
Mhm.
I need to know though. I would like to ask some military historians though, like that's because of the Vietnamese though. I mean, mostly not because of Americans. I mean,
Exactly. And the same
yeah,
thing, same comparison of Afghanistan. They resisted, they didn't
they resisted.
capitulate. And now they're in control of the country, just like the
Yeah,
Vietnamese. I see the same scenario occurring with this war. It's going to be very, it already is very unpopular, and it's going to be more disruptive, causing prices to go up and everyday lives being, screwed with. And there's going to be increasing opposition to the war, and eventually we'll leave, but not easily. It's not like we're just going to pull up stakes. Oh, sorry, you made a mistake. Now it's going to be a long, drawn out withdrawal, kind of like Vietnam and Afghanistan. It
Mm.
didn't happen overnight.
Yeah, so here's the question. If Americans could just shoot their officers and go home, it would solve the problem. But imperial armies are very they're not courageous. I mean, the Roman one was they emphasize virtus and discipline, but man, modern armies are they're pretty obedient. It just reflects like a modern corporate atmosphere. It's corporatized. It's always been corporatized, but especially now, I don't see a lot of courage in the ranks to mutiny. So I think that what we're going to have to see is America's going to take some have to get defeated. We've already lost pretty badly, but I mean, I what you're saying is like there's going to have to be some more casualties, and then Americans are really going to start to
Yeah,
question what the yeah
that's part of it. More casualties, higher gas prices, more disruption, higher national debt. I mean, there's a number of things that are going to happen as a result of this, unnecessary war,
yeah.
and eventually people are going to resist to the point that there will be some changes. Now we'll be fed a lot of bullshit, like we got the same bullshit about weapons of mass destruction that aren't really there, and we may get other lies about threats that aren't there. But ultimately, public sentiment will be the primary reason why this war will end.
Well, maybe I would say more of Afghanistan for that one. With the way this one's going, this is the absolute worst military defeat of Americans in history. I think, in earlier wars, you saw the rebels just kind of wear down the empire. Vietnamese didn't win most of the battles, but so far, I have to say the Iranians are kicking ass over there. I mean, we
Well, I
made
mean,
this, you know.
yeah, I mean they're certainly causing problems. There's what been 7 casualties in Vietnam. What did you have, like 58,000?
Oh
Uh,
no, I don't. It's you can't go by body count. That's always the trap. Um, the thing here is when you knock out a $300 million radar, it affects all of the defenses in the region. It affects the ability to
Great.
stop the incoming missiles, and so all you have to do is take out the infrastructure. You don't even have to take out the people themselves. That's just the nature of modern warfare. Is the extreme reluctance of Westerners to their credit, I guess, to lose their lives for an empire, which is good. But what's replaced is the infrastructure there. So destroy that and you beat America. You don't have to kill all the soldiers.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
point. In fact,
yeah,
this conflict is more technological than ever
yeah,
before. It's a drone war.
yeah. Drone
Uh,
war.
and so we're going to see lots of bombings and missiles and drones and so forth. And you're right. Iran's objective is to hit radar sites or airports, fuel depots, etc. To resist. Um, and like we talked about before, not be defeated. And
Yeah,
short of a ground invasion of Iran, Iran will not be defeated.
no,
And the
yeah.
West does not have the appetite for a ground invasion
Oh
of
no, no,
Iran.
definitely not.
No, no.
Well, here's a question though. You said earlier this unnecessary war. For me, of course, I my heart breaks for the Iranians. 165 children schooled on day one. Americans murdered 165 children. So, I mean, I want revenge for that. But the thing, so I don't want the war. No, I didn't want it. I would want Palestine to be liberated and without a war. But we're dealing with Nazis here. The Israelis are not going to give up territory without getting smashed. And so I'm thinking like we need a war. So I'm glad the war started. Well, I'm not glad, but let me rephrase this. I'm not glad the war started because I was really hurt by the murder of the Ayatollah. I guess I'm just pragmatic in knowing that this is one of the most necessary and I think greatest resistance wars in history. I mean, this is really unprecedented here. And so for me, it was necessary because I didn't see Palestine being liberated without a war here. I just didn't see Israel ever giving up, ever stopping the siege. Now, what is it, 18 years? I just didn't see them stopping the 18-year siege unless you force them. It's just like any siege in history. If you go back to Roman history, you need a relief army. And for our people, for my side, the Palestinian cause, the only relief army I see is the Iranians.
Yeah, but Iran's not going to march, 500,000 troops from Tehran to Tel Aviv. That's not going to happen.
Well,
Uh,
we don't need that. We just need for them to disable the Israeli military. You don't necessarily need like the land army marching in. You would see that 1,000 years ago, like with 636, the Battle of Yarmouk. They're an
right.
actual, yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be it's a drone war, and it's so hard to expel Israel. That's the goal
Mhm.
of Iran is to expel Israel, right?
Well,
Uh,
the Iranians are, of course, the Iranians are pro-Palestine, but they have national interests. From what I'm hearing from the Iranians, they really first they have to secure Iran. I think that's their primary objective is to make sure that never again can the Americans murder their Ayatollah or murder 165 school children. So I think that's first, but yeah, that necessarily coincides with the liberation of Palestine because the enemy's the same. Uh,
Yeah, my viewpoint is a little different than yours. I still hold out hope for negotiation, some sort of negotiated peace, and that includes the two-state solution. And, I personally think that Israel has a right to exist, and that there has to be some sort of negotiated peace with the Palestinian homeland. And hopefully, in my view, that can happen. Um, Chances are slim, admittedly, but otherwise we have an endless war with only one acceptable outcome, which is the destruction of Israel.
Yes, that's what we want. We want my side. We want the destruction of Israel. I don't like if I were to tell the Europeans, let's just go back in history to. So if you were to tell the Russians and the Polish, like we're going to have to make a deal here with Nazi Germany, for the sake of peace, and I know that they massacred a lot of people, but let's try to live in peace. I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians and Poles said, fuck you. No. I mean, for my side, like I've been too deep in this. I know how the Israelis think. They really are a very extremely well programmed fascist militarized colony. I mean, they are dangerous fucking people, man. You don't like no Palestinian should ever have to live next to these people. Like in the West Bank, the Chabad rabbis are straight out of the Babylon 2,500 years ago, talking about the Gentiles and the chosen people and how the Gentiles have a soul that's inferior to the Jewish one and like an animal's. It's just like, they're just it's got to go. And for the Palestinians, I'm listening to what they say. They're the people that have been invaded. And a lot of them think like, hell no, I don't have to live next to this Nazi. Like, get him out of here. I don't feel safe next to this person. And some of the stuff that I've read about, my God, the Henry Job thing where this little girl was shot to death, and then they shot the paramedics. It's like this has been going on for 3 years, and we want Israel totally annihilated. And and I respect your opinion because you're not as deep in this as I am. I've just been I'm shell shocked by it, and angry, but you have a point there. Let me say this to your point. Um, I think at a minimum we should see the end of the siege of Gaza. I think that's feasible. I think Iran, now that they have the advantage, here's what we can do at a bare minimum. Let's have the Palestine recognized as a state. That's something. At a minimum, that's something.
Agree.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And the two-state solution has been, suggested by a lot of people on both sides of the aisles here in America. And I know that it's rejected by Israel. It's pretty much, rejected by a lot of Palestinians too.
yeah,
But
and
I think that's the most plausible resolution to the carnage.
yeah. Well, and then once you have a free Palestine, then my fear would be we would lose momentum though. And but I don't know. If you got a free Palestine, then it's like an only a matter of time. Then if there's no killing and warfare, then you could sort of wear down Israel through BDS or something. But I have to say, I mean, for most of my people, this is something we've been waiting for years. We want Iran to go all the way, and we don't want them to stop. But at the same time, we don't want the Iranians to keep getting bombed, carpet bombed by Trump
Exactly.
and Netanyahu. So, boy, it's a tough position when you've got a Nazi, and I won't say Nazi anymore. This is not 1945. When you have a Zionist in your midst, it's God, what do? You don't want to sacrifice your own people, but you can't trust this people. For the second time, the United States was doing negotiations with Iran when they attacked Iran. It's like if I'm an Iranian, I can never trust these people until they're out of here.
Yeah, yeah, and that same sentiment, exists on the other side. Israel is saying, yeah, we have to have them out of here, out of Gaza, and
No.
out of Israel.
Okay. That was a good place to cut off Mike. He was giving us Israel's perspective. Okay, but this is kind of interesting though. Like even I at the beginning, I was like, people would say, "Yeah, but the UN and Israel's there and the right to exist and stuff," and I'd say, "Yeah," even though grudgingly, I don't. Who cares what Israel thinks? But I think we reached some common ground here that I thought actually is probably feasible. I think Iran can win the war, and what's likely is at a minimum we see the liberation of Palestine that's there now, the West Bank and Gaza. And I think the world isn't going to settle for anything less than that. So I think we can be hopeful for that. As for anything more, we'll have to see. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining a scenario where Iran resists, won't capitulate, won't surrender
Mhm.
unconditionally,
Mhm.
and instead continues to disrupt commerce and so forth in the Middle East, to the point that they can draw the West to the negotiating table
Yeah.
and potentially negotiate for the freedom of Palestine, a two-state solution. Uh, how much leverage Iran can create with this disruption is an open question.
Mhm. Yeah, I fortunately they have help. I heard news from my friend one night recently. I forget the day, it's been a long week, that Hezbollah had finally re-entered the war, fully rearmed, retrained, and ferociously eager.
Mhm, mhm.
As you know, I've been over there multiple times and it was very quiet. I mean, the mood to me was tense in Lebanon. I mean, the people were relaxed, but I don't know, it just felt like something was going to happen and nobody really knew what was going to happen. Um, and as it turns out, that was all me. I mean, they had everything in control. They had everything in control. That right now, I can kind of describe what's going on. There's been guerrilla attacks all along the Israeli, the of occupied Palestine,
Hmm.
and they've knocked out 6 tanks, 3 drones, and what they're trying, and not only that, but they've been attacking the logistics, radars,
Hmm.
and so on, which is that's the goal really is to immobilize the West's forces, their air force, their military, attack the logistics, attack their lines of communication and supply, just as the Parthians did in ancient times against the Romans. Like you don't want to fight the Romans exactly to a standstill because there's more of them and they had more firepower. Talking about the Western armies, but attack their logistics, and that's what Hezbollah is doing now. And they've evolved well, they're so adaptable, Hezbollah. They go from hybrid, where they will defend a village and then they'll go back to guerrilla routes and do hit and run ambushes like they're doing now. And
Hmm.
this has taken a toll on on the Jewish colony because Iran is hitting them hard, and that does impact. When you knock out the air bases, the radars, and everything, it impacts their ability to launch airstrikes. And as you know, from the past, well, from all of Western wars, America included, it is the Air Force that's the advantage that they have over the native peoples. And once you hit
Hmm. Tell
the Air
us.
Force, yeah. So that's another element to this is right on the doorstep, the gates of occupied Palestine are potential liberators. I mean, one of the toughest armies in the world, man for man, that is Hezbollah.
Yeah, they're comparable to guerrilla fighters in Vietnam. We talked about that
Yeah.
earlier, about how stubbornly tenacious they were. And I think that stubborn tenacity is what's needed in this conflict too. Not, I don't like to use the word, to defeat the West, but to not be defeated.
Right, right. That's
Uh,
correct. Yeah.
and by not being defeated, they win their objectives.
Yeah.
And the objectives here is that the Western armies depart. And as we were just saying, hopefully we can create a free Palestine.
Yeah, and I was in Lebanon speaking with a reporter there, um, and he did say that the concept of the tunnels for Arab resistance they derive directly from Vietnam because they have no air force. You gotta
Mhm.
survive the bombardment, and then once that ends, then go on the attack again, and that's what's happening now um, with Hezbollah. And they had help from the North Koreans to build those huge tunnels in the mountains. I've been paying attention to the war. What we were told by the West, the American and Israeli media, was that they were heavily degraded. And I'm looking at the battlefield now and reading reports. It's the almost the opposite of degraded. They were very like this is historic patience and strategic brilliance from the Arabs. They just know how to. They're just not impatient like Americans are. They knew how to wait for the right moment.
Yeah, yeah. Another comparison is the rope-a-dope tactic that we talked about with the Roman military not too many years ago, where the Romans would simply absorb the slings and arrows and so forth from the enemy until the enemy got tired,
Mhm.
and then they would launch their offensive. It's a, it's similar here in that Iran is absorbing this massive bombardment
Yeah.
without defeat, and not only that, but they're launching guerrilla-like offensive maneuvers like drones and missiles that hit strategic targets.
Mhm.
In a way, this is a high-tech drone guerrilla war on the part of Iran. And eventually, it will wear down the West, just like in Vietnam and Afghanistan.
Yeah, and I was to say 2 things. I didn't want to centralize and say Arabs are the same at all times because I think that, the Germanic peoples, Armenians, showed considerable patience to set up that
Ambush.
surprise ambush in Teutoburg. I mean, imagine the patience that it took to set that up, to set up the battlefield, the ambush, to um, to flatter Varus into becoming for Arminius to become his confidant to like that. I mean, that was the Al-Aqsa of ancient times, and so maybe it's just you have to be patient when you're fighting an empire. You just don't have an option because you don't have the firepower, the manpower to compete.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and I think there is a little bit of wisdom to that rope-a-dope strategy where you absorb all these million-dollar missiles that the West is shooting on Iran, and eventually those million-dollar missile stockpiles will deplete, and then they won't have as many missiles, obviously, to shoot, but also their treasury will deplete.
Yeah.
And that depletion of the treasury will also cause unhappiness at home, causing political pressure to end the war as well.
Yes. To return to what you're saying about the Romans, there's some people who don't want to talk about ancient history and think it's irrelevant, but I just use it as a way to understand the modern battlefield. It's not useless. With the ancient battles, they would concentrate a lot of men in one place to fight. Okay, and then each individual soldier would have a combat with another soldier from another army. You can't do that today because of the destructiveness of modern weapons. You've got to
Mm.
spread them out. And so the only difference I see, and of course this is an ancient historian talking, but I just call it this is the Battle of South Lebanon. The battlefield is bigger because of the destructiveness of the weapons, but you have individual soldiers fighting individual soldiers still. I don't see it as any different. It's just the men are spread out and thinking that way using Roman history in that way just allows me to understand the battlefield to some extent. The soldiers are spread out because the weapons are destructive.
Right.
You know,
Weaponry is
yeah,
completely different. We don't have set piece battles anymore. I mean, heck, that kind of went out with World War II. And ever since then, we've been doing technological warfare, bombs, missiles, and then guerrilla type tactics, like we saw in Vietnam. And that's what we're seeing here. I keep coming back to this, but I think it's apt. This is guerrilla warfare on the part of the Arab states, including Iran at this point. Even on a high technological level, it's still guerrilla warfare.
mhm,
And I'll give you a quick example. A drone costs about $30,000 for Iran to make. For the West to shoot down the drone with, say, a Patriot missile,
mhm.
millions. That's a pretty good trade in terms of economics
Yeah,
to
and
deplete the ability of the West.
yeah, and it almost seemed to me like we're looking at the Parthians again. The Parthian shot. The Iranians are shooting their arrows, their missiles, and the Romans are just unable to strike back. They just don't have just like the legions. When they made the mistake of marching into Parthia, they did not have they weren't prepared. They had the muscle, the armor, but not the ability to strike back. And so I see the missiles. It's just reminded me of Karai over again.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
the Parthian shot and the horse archer. That's a whole other discussion. But
yeah,
the tribes of Germany, I think, is maybe a little more apt comparison because there were a lot of guerrilla warfare with that. I mean, just even with Teutoburg, where it was a huge ambush. It was very carefully set up, and the Roman army was attacked by smaller bands in the woods, shooting arrows, advance and retreat. That's the same type of tactics we're seeing in the Middle East, guerrilla warfare.
mm. Except when except when the Israelis are going to move. See, what they did was they demolished all the buildings close to the frontier, and now who knows why they were vindictive. But now they're advancing into South Lebanon with no cover, and they're being picked off one by one because they're idiots. And so when they get to this is guerrilla warfare right now, but when they get to the villages that are still standing, they're gonna have to take the villages, and then you may see God, if the Jews even get that far, they may not, but if they do, they're going to have a fight to the death because in the villages that are still standing, Hezbollah will defend their positions. They have fixed positions. I'm not the most knowledgeable on it, but there was these things that the Israelis in 2006 called nature reserves, where they were lured into prepared ambushes. It was like a they defended terror. They didn't run away. In other words, Hezbollah they ambushed them with Cornet missile launchers, and and the mountains themselves channel tanks into these kinds of ambushes. If you've looked
Mhm.
at South Lebanon, it's the worst country you can imagine for tanks. It's so mountainous,
Very
and
good.
yeah, so we'll see but it's this is really unprecedented though. Like, I mean, we're looking at like one of the biggest decolonial fights in world history. Like this, there's been multiple invasions, but the difference now is Hezbollah is fighting for its life. So I just don't see like a calm ending to that. Now, I don't. I mean, I feel for the Arabs. I don't want there to be any more martyrs, but at the same time, I'm just looking at the situation. I just don't see a peaceful end when you're dealing with like a Nazi. They had the government in Beirut declare Hezbollah illegal. Well, already that's a fight to the death. I mean, Hezbollah's not going to disarm, so now they're surrounded, you
Right.
know.
Same with Hamas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I just see this from my perspective as being as long term, seemingly endless guerrilla conflict. Uh, no one, the West in particular, has no appetite for sending in a standing army, even in the form of a lot of men on the ground, boots on the ground, as they say, because, as you said, it's too risky. They'll be picked off. They'll be killed.
Mhm.
And yeah, the West does not want their youngsters, going to the Middle East and dying.
Well,
So that's an argument for continuing the technological war. Just bomb, bomb, bomb.
yeah, but if that continues, then you're going to see what I said, or what you said couldn't happen. Like right now, Iran is winning the artillery duel. Also, it's 1 o'clock. We may have to court. Let
Oh,
me,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Maybe we should have a few comments here to wrap this up. Go
Okay, I'll
ahead.
wrap it up. I'll wrap it up. If we have a sustained artillery duel, that's what missiles are, artillery, basically.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, Iran will win at this rate. They're winning. Man, the colony has not been hit like this before. If this continues, then it's going to open up the way for an invasion by Hezbollah. The Iraqis are in it now. Yemen is waiting. And then there's the West Bank, which could blow up at any minute. And when the skies are clear, and Iran has an air force, you could conceivably see at some point, finally, armies of liberation marching with a vengeance into the colony. But maybe I think what we reached a common ground earlier. At the very least, I think we're going to see the Gaza liberated. That I think the world is going to have to say that's at least we're going to get that.
That's a
Yeah,
reasonable, achievable
yeah,
goal. I
yeah.
disagree with you in that, the West could be softened up to the point where a ground army could invade Israel or Palestine. But for now, yeah, the war will continue. The guerrilla war, the exchange of missiles and drones and so forth, and it will go on for a long, long
Yeah.
time, perhaps even years, dude.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and
yeah, so you're saying this artillery duel could last a long time.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I disagree with you in that Iran is winning the artillery duel.
Oh,
They're
it's
they're accepting, what,
no,
10 times more damage in terms
no,
of
no. See,
bombardment.
well, see, your news is you're getting it from the mainstream. I'm getting it from people that are bullshitted. I'm getting it from the Iranians, the Lebanese, and Russians and Chinese who just don't. The mainstream media over in America is doing literal damage control. I'm looking at the actual reports, and Israel is getting hammered. Like when you start to knock out these radios with these radars with $50,000 drones. That one in where was it? Bahrain, and then the other one in Jordan, $300 million. The West just can't keep that up. It may take years, but before we see armies invade. But no, no, the goal for all of our people, from my side, is armies to invade and evict the invaders. Now it may not happen tomorrow, but no, that's the goal. We just don't know when that's going to happen. But at this rate, um, I mean, did you say? I mean, you may not have seen the footage, but the colonists are desperate to get out. He had to close. They had to close the airports. There were so many people that wanted to leave. You know what I mean? This is not a good. If see, there's no strategic depth to the colony. It's very thin. It's very small. It's dependent upon the West, and so I'll wrap up with this. When the West doesn't want this colony anymore, you know, then it's really in trouble for
Well,
them.
when the cost becomes too great to defend the colony, then it will be abandoned.
Yeah, true.
That's the way that I would put it, and
Yeah,
I think that was the most, that may be the best possible outcome
yeah, I think that's likely.
uh, for the East, or the Arab states, is for Israel and America, the West, to give up. The cost is just too high, and to heck, I mean, that happened in ancient Rome. The cost of invading Germany and maintaining territory in Germany became too high, and they retreated to beyond the Rhine.
Mhm.
That could easily happen in the Middle East as well. But now's a
Yeah.
good time to break. I got to
Okay.
run. Good discussion. We'll be in touch for the next segment next week.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Later.